Again, in a recent video I talked about using NURBS surfaces to control the movement of joints on the head. This is done to represent the rolling of the skull. And you see here my NURBS surfaces. So what I've got here is a follicle which rides along the surface via its UV values, and I use this control object through a plus minus average node to control those UV values, and then I have a joint with a group below the joint, and I am parent constraining that joint to the follicle, and in this way I get a joint that slides. You can see it rotating as it slides. I'm only moving in one axis on this controller. That slides along that surface. Yeah, so my skin weighting is not the best right now. I apologize. It's kind of in a rough stage right now, but not too bad. We can get some interesting shapes. Once these actually get put into poses, I'm sure it'll look a little better, but at any rate, well, anyhow. And then out here I just have some regular constrained joints. Certain places I put surfaces, others I didn't. I guess you could really use this for the whole head. For the purposes of exploring this technique, I sort of selected some key areas, so I still see some problems there. But anyways, so just talk real quick about how this rig is set up. Right now I have this joint-driven rig. We'll actually go ahead and show that. So I have this joint-driven rig, and what that is actually doing is, and I'll hide the joint-driven rig, is kicking out a blend shape to this target head right here. And I do that so that I can get a few layers of control. I'm not actually making this for anything more than practice purposes, so I can kind of go nuts with it. But so you see here the deformation from the joint-driven rig is being applied via a blend shape to this target mesh here. It's kind of nice in many ways. As you see here, I rotate my head, and that rig stays behind, and my joint-driven head is still in place there. Let me hide that up real quick, and you can see then these deformations are still going to take effect. It's just like sculpting and blend shapes. You get a little less control, I guess, than using a blend shape, but you also have this nice rig in place that you can always come back to and create new shapes, or edit existing shapes really easily. So kind of cool, and the whole thing can be scripted out a little. Well, actually, a lot easier than blend shapes. I don't really know anyone who's able to effectively script out the creation of a blend shape. That's a very artistic sort of thing. So, at any rate, there we go. There's our head. So we got two heads here, and one of the things we're going to talk about is adding yet another layer of control. We're actually going to use another head, and this head we're going to create blend shapes, regular sculpted blend shapes that we can push through this head and then back out to our target head. The reason this is kind of nice keeping them all split like this is we can turn off any of these heads at any time. So an animator could be animating, and you could just turn off the blend shapes. Maybe you made some nice slider controls, that sort of thing, but he's animating away, and it evaluates pretty quick, just moving around joints. A little slower because you have this whole thing going on with the follicles evaluating, but still very quick. So, and then you can turn on the blend shapes later on while you're animating to do the fine tuning, or when it comes to render time. So what I'm going to do tonight is save out some poses, and I'm going to just talk about that real quick, and then I'll probably split the next part into another video. But at any rate, I'm going to save out some poses, and then I'm going to load some of those poses and create the beginnings of my blend shapes from those poses, and then go ahead and hook them up. So to save out my poses, I just wanted to mention this cool little tool here. This is Pose Library. Animators at work love this tool. This is actually my first time using it, but anyways, you can see here, um, the owner is accepting donations for development. I know he's been developing this for a long time. I've seen it floating around, so pretty good stuff. Got it off Creative Crash. Go ahead and download that. It's a handy tool just to have around for situations like this. So here's Pose Library in action. If you don't know, I'll tell you real quick. To set this up, you put the poselib.mel into your scripts folder. That's usually like my documents, Maya scripts, or you can put it in Maya 2011 scripts. Then you'll run Pose Library, and one of the first things it'll do is actually ask you to choose a Pose library. Make sure you do all that stuff, or you could end up with some troubles down the road. But anyways, once it's set up, you're all set to go. And you see here what I did already is I created a couple shapes, wide for the left and the right. I'll say real quick, I'd like to talk just a little bit about how I like to break up my shapes. If you've never heard of the FAX system, you should definitely check that out if you're doing any sort of facial animation or rigging. Basically, it's a facial action coding system. It's a system of analyzing individual muscle contraction and expansion in the face to create our various expressions. They talk about action units, wherein several muscles move in combination to create a certain pose. So what I generally like to do is think about my poses in that way, and then creating rather using those action units and bringing those shapes together to create a smile or a frown, or brow raise, that sort of thing. But I won't go immediately in here and say, okay, I'm gonna make a smile, because you get into this whole vicious cycle then of, okay, I'm making a smile, and then I'm gonna make a frown, but these both use a wide shape, and things just tend to get muddled really quickly when you start shooting right for poses. It's better if you sit and you think about these individual movements that are going to happen instead. For instance, if you look at a wide shape, you're getting the contraction of one individual muscle, right? Rosaurus here is going to contract, and it is going to pull this corner of your lips out and back towards the back of the jaw here. So it's not even moving in a straight line. Again, it's the reason I put the skeleton in there, is it would never just shoot straight out, right? I mean, it's you have a skull under there, and you want to see this thing rolling around the skull, right? So, at any rate, I don't go right for smiles. I break all these down into movements. So I'll say, the Rosaurus is contracting, and it's creating this wide shape, and then I'll go ahead and save that wide shape out. It's not to say that I won't, adjust this a little up or down towards a smile or a frown, but, in general, we're just looking for that straight out movement. So here we're going to just, we'll just jump right in. I haven't really tested this rig much, so I'm not sure what I'm going to end up with, but we'll jump right in and try to create one or two more new shapes. So in this case, I'll go for a narrow shape, and we'll reference handy Google Body, and I love this program. It's like one of the coolest inventions Google come up with. So here you see the orbicularis oris, right? Getting narrow shapes, you're seeing contraction of this muscle. So everything basically starts pulling in towards the center as the muscle contracts. And again, we'll see how well this surface holds up. Again, I haven't tested the shape of it very thoroughly yet, but we're hoping here that I get a pretty good result to start with. I don't want to go right into sculpting blend shapes. I'd like to see how much I can get done with decent skin weighting and joint placement and just posing of these joints, shape of my NURBS surface that I'm using, that sort of thing. So that's kind of my goal here. So I'm able to push this pretty far. I don't really want to try to make an O shape or anything like that. I'm really just trying to squeeze these lips in pretty tight, as if that whole orbicularis muscle is just contracting. So, I see some things here I really don't like right off the bat, but for the most part, we can come in here and get a pretty decent shape. So I don't want to bore you too much with this part. So we'll move on here. But so anyways, I'll say that I can fiddle with that all day. You know how it is. So we'll come in here and we will go ahead and create a new pose. And you see here, Pose Library creates this cool little camera. You can actually toggle that around. Yeah, it's hard to look at. Anyways, so we'll do a left and use LT narrow. There we go. And create a pose. Bam, and you see it's going to end up right in there with our other poses. So it's probably a good time just to break this off. It's getting a little long, and then I'm going to come back and show you how we're going to split this off and create a blend shape out of that, and then come in and really start sculpting out this shape even more.